Lily lay on the beach like a wet rag. The waves broke around her in a slow rhythm, each watery breath sucking her down a little into the sand, as though the ocean, having failed to drown her, had decided to bury her anyway. She opened her eyes and looked out through a cage of wet hair that flowed along the sand like thin rivers of grey. The sky was darkening, and the beach glowed orange in the evening light as the earth spun into night. An ant moved quickly over the sand just in front of her eyes. She raised her hand and touched a finger to it. It climbed on as the weak, rolling water again shifted the sand from under her. Lily rolled onto her back and held her hand up to the deepening blue sky. The ant walked back and forth along her finger, over the little yellow grains of sand that stuck to her skin like stars in a pale heaven. Holding her hand out so as not to hurt the fragile creature, she stood and walked the short distance to a patch of small, sharp, pale green plants that held on to life at the edge of the dunes. She lowered her finger to the plants and waited patiently until the ant stepped off onto a narrow stem. It hurried down and disappeared. Lily stood, and, turning to the ocean, watched as the distant horizon swallowed the final, thin, bright crest of the sun. She then turned to take the narrow, sandy path to the village. It was dark when she arrived at the house, a white, weatherboard bungalow with a gently sloping roof and a single round skylight that was an eye on the heavens. The house was just a shadow against a sky dotted with stars. The lights were off, and the home without its people was asleep. Lily walked the gravel path that snaked through the trees at the edge of the property. She stopped in the garden and lay herself in the hammock they kept out on the lawn. She would lie with her husband, and together they would look up at the Milky Way that glowed with the faint light of billions of stars across 100,000 years. But tonight the bright moon was rising behind the trees, and its silver light was enough to wash the sky clean of all but the brightest stars. The sky and the ocean had brought them here, both vast, living deserts, seemingly empty and dry of human touch. The sky here was alive, free from the shroud of light and pollution that suffocated much of the planet. There were no lights on the village roads, and the nearest town was miles away, behind the hills that sheltered them from the rest of the world. The hammock gently swung in the soft breeze that came up from the ocean. "I'm so tired," Lily thought, and closed her eyes. She awoke on the sofa that sat under the large window that looked out onto the garden. It was still dark. She didn't remember coming into the house, nor did she know how long she'd been there. It could have been hours or days. The familiar sound of a car turning up the gravel path to the door brought her out of her hazy thoughts. She heard the doors open, and then low, calm voices. One, her husband, the other, Max, his friend. Normally they'd be laughing, they always laughed, but not tonight. The doors closed and the car drove back down the gravel path to the road that led to the village. The turning of the key in the lock was slow and deliberate, and seconds passed before the door was gently pushed open. She heard the keys being placed into the brass dish by the heavy front door that then closed, locking in the darkness. The slight shuffle of thick wool socks on wood was the familiar sound of her husband in the house. He walked through the darkness of the living room to the open kitchen and the large refrigerator, its door a collage of photos and memories held fast by magnets bought on a dozen holidays. The beer bottles rattled together as the door was opened, a sound Lily knew well. "Yes," she thought, "this is my house." She watched him in the dark, his silhouette outlined by the light of the fridge. He took out a half-empty bottle of white wine. They had opened it together last night as they discussed the planned boat trip. Her husband twisted off the rubber stopper. It hissed as the air rushed in. He drank directly from the bottle. "Hello, Frank," she said. He stopped, the bottle held tight in his hand. He turned slowly and placed it on the counter, careful not to make a noise, then stood, still and dark, breathing as quietly as he could manage. "Lilly?" he asked softly, unbelieving. She stepped forward into the reach of the faint light from the still open door of the refrigerator. "Why did you push me?" she asked. "Why did you try to kill me?" "Lilly? Why, Frank?" "You're dead." "No, Frank." He closed his eyes. "You're dead, Lilly." She walked up and stood before him. "Look at me, Frank. Look at me." He opened his eyes and spoke with barely a whisper. "You're dead, Lilly." And in his face she could see. He was broken. "But you pushed me, Frank," she said, confused. He raised his hand and touched her cheek, her warmth on the back of his fingers. "What is this?" he said. "You pushed me." "You're dead, Lilly. I saw you just now at the police station, dead. I woke up on the beach. I walked here." He traced the curve of her neck with his fingers, her shoulders and arm to her hand. "You opened the gate at the back of the boat, Lilly, while I was preparing lunch. You looked at the camera, you said goodbye and rolled your wheelchair off the back. Lilly, you knew the camera was recording. You made sure there was a record. The police have the video, Lilly. And what wheelchair? I saw the dolphins. We hadn't seen them this year, so I was excited. I ran to the front of the boat, but you came at me, Frank. There was something in your eyes. You pushed me, Frank, pushed me over the railing." "No, Lilly. You haven't been able to walk for over 10 years, not since the crash." "The crash?" He pointed towards the old upright piano that they'd found in a junk shop just after they bought the house. Sitting along the top of the piano were photos in frames of all sizes. Lilly walked over and looked from frame to frame. Some pictures she knew, photos of their wedding and the birth of their daughter. But there were others, of places and times she didn't know, and in each she was in a wheelchair. She turned back to her husband, her mouth open. "What is this?" she asked. "The crash, Lilly. About 12 years ago. Abby's store. We were going to the Mulberry, remember?" Confused, Lilly sat on the old painted wooden stool in front of the piano. "Yes. That kid, he ran the red light. You were driving, you." "No, you were driving, Lilly. That's why it was so hard for me. You hate driving, but that night, for some reason, you wanted to. You said you wanted to give me a break so I could drink for once. I shouldn't have let you. You were in the hospital for months, Lilly. I didn't know if you were even going to live." "That was you, Frank, in the hospital. I nearly lost you. And yesterday you pushed me, Frank." "No, you jumped. Why would I jump? Why would I push you?" They looked at each other, unable to answer. The house was quiet around them, dark and watching as they faced each other, unable to find the words to explain what was happening, unable to do anything more than look and touch and hold. Frank took Lilly's hand and led her over to the old red sofa under the window, where they sat holding each other. They woke huddled together. The bright early sun had crept up on them as they slept on the sofa below the window. The light blanketed them in gold as they lay, each folded perfectly into the other. Lilly's matted hair smelled of the ocean. Frank kissed the top of her head. "You're still here," he said. "You still love me?" she asked. "I never stopped, Lilly." She turned to look at him, her thin dress stiff with the salt of the ocean. "You still think I'm dead?" I don't know. Maybe the other you. What do you mean? You disappeared, the old you, slowly, after the accident. You became distant, not really interested in doing anything together. I had to really bug you to go out on the boat yesterday. We used to go out every weekend. You were the one who lost interest, Frank. You talked of selling the boat, or selling the house, actually. I would never do that. He slipped from Lily's arms and stood, looking briefly out of the window, at the garden and the bright sun that had cleared the top of the trees that lined the driveway. I'll never do that. The phone rang. They looked at each other for a moment. You'd better, said Lily. Frank walked to the wall phone hanging by the hall door and waited a second before picking it up. Lily watched as Frank leaned against the doorframe, listening intently. He looked at Lily before speaking. Right, thanks, he said, before putting the receiver back. That was Max, he said. He said the search overnight hadn't turned up anything, but now that it's daylight, they'll be able to resume the air search. For what? For you, Lily. For me. I'm here. Yes, now. But last night you were dead, not missing. I saw you, Lily, at the police station. Max was with me, and now he's telling me that you're still missing. It doesn't make sense. This is... I don't know what this is. Why didn't you tell him I was here? I don't know. Are you here? Lily stood and walked over to him. Maybe we should go to the station, she said. Perhaps, I don't know, people do strange things when they're stressed, see things that aren't real. Real? I didn't imagine you dead under that sheet in that dress, your hair still damp. He looked down at her. I didn't. And why do we remember things on the boat so differently? And he took a few steps backwards and looked at Lily standing, her hair still matted. How are you walking? Did I imagine that too, you, in that wheelchair for all these years? But you were the one hurt in that crash, Frank. Then what are those photos? He walked over to the piano, pointing to the pictures arranged across the top. Why are you... He stopped. What is it? Lily asked, walking over to him. Frank stood quietly, staring at the photographs of their wedding, of the birth of their eldest, and of her graduation last year, where the three of them stood proudly together, all of them, standing. He looked from photo to photo. In every one, Lily was just as she was now, standing and beautiful. She walked up beside him and reached out for a photograph of the three of them in a restaurant, smiling at the camera. I don't remember this, she said, picking it up. This must have been her birthday. She pointed at the photo. Look, that's a birthday card. It says 25. That was last year. We went to Paris, the three of us, but you got sick and couldn't join us for dinner. Frank took the picture from her. No. She went to Dublin with Adam. You and I went out together that night to the French place. He touched the picture. I don't know what this is. They stood together as the world seemed to unwind around them. Motes of dust glistened in the orange light of the setting sun. I'll make coffee, said Lily, dimly aware that they had been standing for a long time, unmoving, silent. I'll do it. Frank handed the photo to Lily, then walked to the kitchen. He picked up the kettle and filled it at the sink before putting it on the gas range. Lily put the photograph back on the piano. That was a fun birthday, she said, walking back to the counter. Hard to believe she's going to be 14 soon. Yep, getting old, you and me. Speak for yourself. Where is she anyway? Who? Anna, our daughter. Lily felt something pass from her, like the fading memory of a dream. Anna? Well, she's at Helen's tonight, isn't she? Tomorrow as well, I believe. Oh, so it's just you and me then, is it? I know what you're thinking. Lily picked up the half-empty wine bottle. Did we have this last night? She asked. I don't remember. Last night? No, we. He frowned. That's weird, I can't remember. What did we do last night? Well, Lily laughed. God, we must both be getting senile. Didn't you go out with Max somewhere? Max? No, I don't think so. Wait, didn't we go out on the boat yesterday? Yes, we did, didn't we? That's weird. Lily put the bottle back on the counter. She walked over to Frank and slipped her small hands around his waist. Well, I don't mind going senile so long as we do it together. She put her head on his chest. Of course, he said gently. Everything together. He stroked her soft, smooth hair. Let's go out. We haven't been to the Mulberry for a bit. Sounds nice, she said, looking up at him. Maybe I should change. Really? No, I think you look great just as you are. Why, thank you. You're not so bad yourself, she said, tapping him playfully on the nose. The kettle started to whistle. Lily walked around the counter and turned off the gas. She took 2 mugs from the wire rack next to the fridge. Tell you what, she said, I'll drive. But you hate driving. Yeah. She unscrewed the large jar of instant coffee. I just feel like giving you a break tonight. So you can drink for once.